Hey everybody, happy holidays from the crew at Certified Forgotten. This is a bit of a departure for us. This is not an episode of Uncertified, our 30-minute show where we talk about new releases. It's not an episode of Certified Forgotten where we have a guest and we talk for an hour about a really cool, underappreciated, underdiscovered horror film. We're feeling seasonal. We are feeling appreciative of the community that we have. We're feeling appreciative of the year that we've had. And we thought we might break character a little bit as the Statler and Waldorf of horror criticism that we are, and talk a little bit about the things that we're thankful for going into a long Thanksgiving weekend. Um, yeah, yeah, we thought maybe we'd be a little personal here. We'd get into our feelings with a I don't know, you're drinking Donato, but I'm sure you've got something fun brewing over the fire right now. Perhaps literally, I know the weird shit that you drink. But let's start with you. What are you feeling thankful for this holiday season?
Yeah, I think, well, number one, I'm thankful that we could just do an episode like this because this is more my style. I mean, you have
Mm-hmm.
the rigid down pat. I kind of like the chaos of let's not have a title topic movie. Let's not have guests. Let's bring ourselves to the podcast for once. We don't like to make this podcast about us, but every now and then, if you're listening, I think it's nice to get to know us as hosts because we're
Every
always
now and then.
here. Right, exactly. Every now and then. You don't need too much of us. That's insane. You can follow us on socials for that, but even then, I warn. So, I mean, I guess to start, like, what am I thankful for this year? I'm gonna plug because listen, if I'm not cross posting, if I'm not taking advantage of our platform, why not? And I just posted an article on IGN. And one of the things that I wrote about that I am most thankful for this year is the diversity of horror releases. And that is not to say every year does not have a wealth of variety in the horror genre, but for so long, it comes in waves. It's trauma horror,
Mm-hmm.
it's remakes, it's we know that every era has its dominant theme. And I think this year, especially looking back on the entire year of horror, and especially like looking at my top five alone, my top five does not have a single similarly themed made film in the bunch. It's The Substance, it's Infested, it's Stop Motion, it's Exuma, it's What's Inside. None of those are overlapping. All of those,
Mm-hmm.
if you're at a film festival, that's like the perfect day because not a single thing is repeating. And to me, I think that is indicative of where we are in the horror genre. I think we are in a place where the entirety of the industry is finding out what's next. And is it going to be the Terrifier 3 wave of slashers? Is it going to be another remake wave? I don't know what that is yet, but I'm excited because that's where we are. And I don't know what's coming next. And I don't know, just the wealth of riches we have this year that are all over the board. I'm very thankful for that this year.
Yeah, you wrote a really good article in the last week that talks about sort of the joy that is Shutter right now and kind of the killer 2024 that Shutter is having. And I think Shutter is kind of an interesting, for me, example of this because I think I love Shutter. Everybody loves Shutter. I think that Shutter movies are often sort of alike. I think that there's sort of a category in the same way that you can kind of say like, oh, I feel like I know what an A24 movie is. There's a couple of things that I think of when I think of Shutter releases. They're of a certain budget. They're of a certain tone. Obviously they draw from the entire history of horror and have a lot of different things therein. But Shutter to me speaks to a certain type of film, especially over the last couple of years that they've been leaning towards. And I think this has been a year where I've just been really excited about the diversity of content. Content's a bad word, but the diversity of films that they have on Shutter. The fact that they're, like you said, like they have an Infested on Shutter, they have an Exuma on Shutter. Like there is a ton of different types of horror movies, and that is kind of the canary in the coal mine for me is, well, if Shutter's programming slate for 2024 is this fucking varied, then once you step out of the horror specific areas and go to wide releases, go to other streamers, other platforms they're picking up on, it just sort of amplifies that. And you see more and more of that happening. So good piece by Matt Donato on Shutter, but it also speaks, I think, to like if even the platform for horror movies is as widely non subgenre specific in 2024 as it's ever been, that's the kind of year we're having overall.
Yeah, and just to go even farther from that, I think theatrically, let's not even talk about Shutter because I think Shutter is still a niche platform as much as
Yeah.
we talk about it all the time. We are the demographic. We are horror fans. We're horror critics. Like Shutter is our haven, but it still isn't the be all end all that it should be. Like, listen, I wish it had billions of people subscribe to it when it only has what I think they hit 2 million, and that was a huge landmark for them.
Yeah.
So number one, I agree with what you're saying. I think a Shutter movie for a while did have a certain kind of budgetary restraint, a certain kind of look as an indie horror film. But I also think that Shutter has gotten, I don't want to say smarter, because what they did was smart. When we were all locked inside during the pandemic, they were putting out one movie a week. Not a year, sorry, that would be insane. They were putting out one movie a week that was brand new. And that was so genius because we couldn't go anywhere. It was lockdown.
Yeah.
We couldn't go to theaters. So not only did they corner the market when we were stuck inside, but I think they realized that once we went back outside that they don't need to do that anymore. And what I have seen as of late is they don't have one brand new movie a week plus a TV show plus a docu series plus, like, they have scaled back in a way that I think has tremendously affected their output. And some of those movies that, let's say, maybe aren't as memorable from those years, and they were just kind of programmers, and hey, here's a new thing, it's on Shutter, let me give it a try. God bless. Again, we all couldn't go outside, that was amazing. But everything they're putting out now is like, I feel like the quality bar has just jumped. They can be more
Yeah.
selective. They can be more focused in what they're putting out. And I think that especially has helped their 2024 so tremendously, because, those other years when they were putting out a bunch of movies that I really didn't connect with me, that was still between a film like Psycho Gorman or One Cut of the Dead, or, the list goes on. This year alone, you have Oddity, you have Late Night with the Devil, you have In a Violent Nature. Like, it is crazy the bangers that they have put out this year versus other years where, like, it was just, let's say, quantity over quality. 2024 is quality over quantity. I like that
Yeah.
is, ooh man, they're really hitting their stride so well, and I love them dearly for that. But I think, going back to what I was saying, sorry, I got sidetracked just talking about Shutter. Theatrically is the same thing. I think the theatrical landscape of horror, as much as it's indicative of the torture porn when it was torture porn era, when the remakes, it was remakes. Like, we knew what studios thought was the big thing at the time, because it was number one, and number two, they just oversaturated the market with it. And for a while after Hereditary, that was A24 type trauma horror movies, and that has started to subside. Like, this year
Hmm.
alone, we're getting Nosferatu. It fucking rips. I've seen it already. Like, it's very good. But we also had a movie like The Substance. Like, watching The Substance on a theater screen, I was baffled that entire third act, that I'm like, this is something that should be VOD. Like the
Yeah.
fact that it got the budget that it did, and it got the release it did. Obviously, a tremendous filmmaker. Obviously, like, so much behind it, the talent, the actors, like Demi Moore, like Quali. Like, it's crazy that The Substance exists, but it does this year. And it's existing against other things like Terrifier 3 doing gangbusters. I'm going to bring that again. Like, whether or not Terrifier is your vibe, and trust me, if it's not, I totally understand. Like, that is very much a, hey, do you like gross out slashers? Not everyone does. That's fine. But the money that that movie made, and proved that this is not obviously derogatory, but a no budget indie could go out there and make 85 plus million dollars in the theater. The fact that we can create horror icons like that again, and we're in the right space where people are craving different types of films, insane. Insane to me. So I think, piggybacking off that diversity, I'm just really thankful that horror always does well. We're not going to have that conversation. We all know that. I wrote a piece for Slash Film. Don't get me angry again. But I can be super thankful that, like, this year especially, there's movies that are doing well out there, and movies that I never expected to exist this year. So I've gotta really hand it to the studios and everyone that's like, they're backing original ideas. And again, they understand that the landscape is now wide open. There's not one thing people are craving. They're craving everything. We always are, but I think especially now, like, this is anyone's time to make the next movement, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I will say, I'm going to say something that I'm thankful for, which is a little off the film path, but I think you'll appreciate it. I've had a thread that's been going, I've been adding to kind of when I feel like it on Blue Sky, which is basically one of those like, one favorite something. And I've been doing my favorite horror comics. So one favorite horror comic. 2024 has been such a goddamn good year for horror comics. I know that's not necessarily your cup of tea, Donato. I am going to change that over time. I have plans for you. But, just one thing alone is like the return of EC Comics, which was a beloved 50s and 60s horror imprint that did like anthology horror. They've come back in a big way with new series like Epitaphs from the Abyss, Cruel Universe. They've got a couple more that are fantasy themed and sci-fi themed. They're going to be launching later this year. And I feel like one of the things that I'm continuing to notice is horror comics have become such a fun intersection point between filmmakers, screenwriters, novelists, people that want to play in a visual medium but don't want to do like a ton of stuff. Like Rebecca McKendry, who is a podcaster, a filmmaker, a screenwriter, a scholar. She has a new horror comic that's coming out later this year. Stephen Graham Jones, who's beloved for his work on The Only Good Indian and the slasher of Angel Lake, or I can't remember the name of its series. He has a long running horror comic series that he's done. Friend of the podcast, Adam Caesar, who did Clown in a Cornfield, did a series called Dead Mall, which is a lot of fun that I have on my shelf. It's been really fun to watch this niche sort of flourish and for it to become such a fun place for people to tell stories that may not necessarily fit or justify, a film release. We've seen the new Alien movie, Alien Romulus, has a prequel that was released as a comic book, and they a forward by what's his face filmmaker. Help me out here. Having a pre
Filmmaker of
Thanksgiving brain fart of Alien Romulus.
Fede Alvarez.
Fede Alvarez. It's been a long week. It's Wednesday, Lemon, but it has been a long week. Fede Alvarez, helped write the thing and has a forward in the comic where he talks about all the events on the station that led up to the movie. I'm having a great time with the creativity on display. I'm having a great time with the fact that horror comics seem to be immune to the need for endless serialization. That they're short stories, that they're self-contained stories, that they're limited releases, but also that they're such a fun breeding ground from talented creatives across industries. If you're a writer, if you're a filmmaker, you're coming here, you're pitching stuff, you're coming up with ideas. It's a really, really good time to be into horror comics as well. And that has been, one of the bigger journeys that I've been on in 2024 is really leaning in and embracing it. And it complements and heightens my joy of the films that these people are involved in, and especially a lot of the movies that the comics are lifting from or kind of aping.
Listen, I'm not as much as you are the Hobbit comic, blah blah blah.
The Hobbit comic, yep.
The horror comic person. I was The Walking Dead before it was a show. I was completely caught up when it started, and I was one of those obnoxious assholes who watched every season going the comics better. And I'm trying to think of how many others I have, but I know I have every omnibus of Hack Slash. I love Hack Slash, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
one
yeah.
of my good kind of sat down and blew through it read throughs of horror comics. So you'll be easier to get me into that you won't have to try that hard. If you get me into horror comics though and reading more, then you have to give wrestling a try again. That's our trade-off.
I'm fine with that, but we've had conversations about the type of wrestling that I would be into.
AEW.
Yeah,
I can get you into AEW.
we've talked about it in previous episodes. When I was a kid, I used to play NCW versus NWO or whatever the
Oh, yeah.
N64 game was, and I was sold on all of that and sort of like the world building elements. And Andrew and I watched the independent wrestling, like the Illinois, whatever it was, base series by the guy that did Last Chance U, which was a really, really good and really fun series. So I think that I don't think I would be, it's sort of like the same as any professional sports. The higher you get, the more I'm like, I don't, I kind of have to temper my enjoyment with this with a grain of salt. But when you're in the minor leagues, I think I could be really into some minor league wrestling.
I know you hate LA. I know this is not your favorite place,
Correct.
but if I could get you out for a showing of Lucha Vavoom, which they do at the Mayan Theater once a month, once every 2 months about, and it is a 3-part lucha wrestling burlesque show, comedy show, full ring, full everything.
Mm-hmm.
Drinking is encouraged, and when I say it's one of the most fun times I've ever had at a wrestling event, it is local only here to the Mayan Theater, and we got to see wrestlers like talking about horror comics and being able to play around with freedom as a creative. These indie wrestling shows, like the guys who wrestle in AEW, come wrestle on these indies, and they get to play different characters, and they get to do all these fun different things. So I got to watch Jack Cartwheel, which very self-explanatory, who's usually a very nice man who just does cartwheels, but he got to be a villain in Lucha Vavoom. And Taya Valkyrie, I'm seeing, like, one of my favorite women wrestlers, just comes out and gets to be a different persona. So I I know Austin has a huge scene. You should go with Richard one time. Mr. Whitaker used to be an announcer for the
Yes, he did.
one of the companies here, and I think you should give indie wrestling a try, because as much as I can get you into AEW, the most fun I have hands down is doing indie wrestling shows, and that's your in. I think once that clicks for you, that's your in.
The way you describe it, it really makes it sound like open mic night, right? Where like Jerry Seinfeld will pop into like an open in like Lower Brooklyn, and people will be like, "Holy shit!" Just because he wants to like work on some new material. I got you.
It's
I'm picking
literally
up what you're
that.
putting down.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, yeah,
not.
yeah.
Except Jerry Seinfeld does the suplex too.
Yes, which the one thing missing from all 10 seasons of Seinfeld or whatever. What else is Spark and Joy? What else are you thankful for?
I'm thankful for some of the things I still have yet to watch. And I say that because there have been so many good movies this year, and there have been so many, well, listen, maybe not all good, but there have just been a deluge of releases. And I still not have seen Red Rooms. I still not have seen a few more thrillers left. And the fact that I now get to kind of take some time after the holidays, and I ain't got any worries anymore. I'm done with all my travel. Festivals are over. We're in the wind down for the next month. And I am super happy that I still have a few of these movies left. And like, I feel like Red Rooms especially. I was on a flight from Orlando to LA, and like Red Rooms was on that flight, and I had the moment
Mm,
where like, all right, I'm on a plane. Like, should I just finally get to Red Rooms? And it's like, no, because
correct.
I want to be in. I want to like completely be immersed. So I watched two Don Lee South Korean action movies where he just beat the shit out of people. That was the choice. But looking forward, I've still got a few that like I don't even think my top 10 is set yet, because Red Rooms has so much hype. Kayla's obviously the PR rep on that, and she does a tremendous job and reps very reputable stuff. So I'm excited for Red Rooms. I'm excited for a few more things left on the docket, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is going to sound a little self-serving to say that I'm thankful for Certified Forgotten, but what I will say, my way of framing this so you can understand the sincerity behind it, is that earlier today I read a piece by Gita Jackson on Aftermath, which is another worker-owned publication. It's a bunch of people that used to work for Kotaku and a couple of other game sites came together to make Aftermath. It's a really cool site that sort of sits at the intersection of gaming and culture, in the way that Defector sits at the intersection of sports and culture. But Gita wrote a piece called "For Love of God, Make Your Own Website," and the article is basically about how the rise of social media has sort of driven us to a handful of platforms, and it's streamlined and simplified the internet. We're in the glory days of when in late 1990s you could go online and there were a billion different niche sites, right? People had like long running websites that were dedicated to whatever in the world. When I was in middle school, I had a project for a middle school technology class that I took, and they were like, "You need to build your own website on GeoCities." So I built a fan site to Volcano, the Tommy Lee Jones movie, and The Ghost of the Darkness, the Val Kilmer Michael Douglas movie about the killer lions. And it made me not only feel nostalgia for the hobbyist sites, the fact that there used to be more of this kind of niche stuff that didn't exist on other platforms. You can still find versions of that on places like Reddit, but like Reddit owns that, right? Like that is a company that owns it. And the argument that Gita makes, especially in the end of it, is that if we're going to democratize the internet, one of the things that we probably need to do is move more content away from a handful of social media sites and move them back to websites that people check, that people bookmark, that they set up in their personal RSS feeds. I've been feeling that energy a bit this year because I've been, subscribing and enjoying so many worker owned stuff. I talk about Rascal, which is a TTRPG website that I really like and that I'm an annual subscriber to. Talk about Aftermath, talk about 404 Media, which is a really cool site on technology that I really love. Um, but I'm thankful for Certified Forgotten within this context because I do think kind of reinforce the notion that I don't want to oversell what you and I are doing, Donato, and say that having an independent horror website is any great shake so that we're saving the world. But I do think that it's something you need to do. Like I think more of this kind of stuff has to live outside of the five companies that own the majority of the places we go to talk about this stuff, I think there need to be alternate sources. People talk about, one of the writers, Chase Carter for Rascal, talks constantly about zines and how in other countries and things like that, it is very common to have like a million niche publications that you might have about every aspect of fashion or style or food or whatever. And that's been something that I've been reflecting on, especially post election, and especially as all these conversations are happening about our, information economy and who is controlling narratives and yada yada yada. Is that as much as we're like in person, we need to do things, we need to be hyper focused on communities and mutual aid and all that kind of good stuff. I do think that we need a billion websites that are all telling their own stories, that are all platforming talented and creative writers. And I think that that is the way that we build a healthy internet that isn't basically just Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and all their various subsidiaries. So I'm grateful that we have an opportunity to do this, that we're blessed with the financial stability, and the time, the free time to pursue something like this. And I'm also thankful for the fact that our community really seems to respond to it, and that we have the respective writers that we respect, which is the most valuable thing we can have. When you and I have a writer that we admire, that's like, oh, I'm very proud of this byline that I have at Certified Forgotten. That is the best validation in the world for us. So that's me and my feelings. Reading this piece on the aftermath today, I found myself thinking a lot about the doors that need to open, and the fact that Certified Forgotten is a small piece of that, but it is a piece of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading a lot of Hi Rogers. I was reading a lot of, I think it's just in the last 2 days, 3 days, these really well written pieces about the deprioritization of links on social media, just like
Yeah,
you're talking about, and what you're talking about, like this information based economy in a way, and how all of these social media websites have been throttling back on links, have been deprioritizing them tremendously because they want to create the idea of a news influencer because they want the content. They don't want to promote a website's content. I know we're using the ugly word, but to social media
yeah,
owners, like content is that's what it is to them. So the idea that information lives in a tweet versus, a well-written research article that you're sharing, and how they're killing that and what that is doing to the concept of thought and curiosity and all these things. And I mean that's why I fell in love with Twitter, that we all have, outside of
yeah,
being owned by a Nazi and all these things. Like, fuck Elon. This is we're very pro fuck Elon podcast. But you know, the idea that Blue Sky came around, and I was like hesitant, and all of a sudden it feels like a community again, and it feels like people actually are interested in learning again, and interested in what you're saying outside of hot takes and
yeah,
nasty words. Like, that's all Twitter is. It's a bunch of trolls and people trying to say the most hyperbolic bullshit so they get the most attention. And the last 3 weeks on Blue Sky, when the mass exodus happened, I feel like the horror sphere finally getting over in more droves, and the idea that people are seeing other people's posts again and people are actually engaging. Like, I could post, I cross post still because sure, I'll put my
sure,
article there anyway. Shutter shared my last one. Thank you, Shutter. Like, I've got to do that stuff, but I can see the benefits of Blue Sky versus Twitter so clearly now. And while I was hesitant, if you're still on the fence and listening to this and still clutching to Twitter because you have a following there, I promise you that following doesn't mean anything in comparison once you get over to Blue Sky and realize that, like, you know, my last piece I posted has like 300 likes, all like hundreds of things. And then on Twitter, it has like 50 likes, few reshares, and that's with a Shutter share. So, like, I am very thankful that Blue Sky is kind of bringing this back. I'm thankful that Blue Sky is making us actually want to be in a positive community again. And I'm not going to say horror community. I'm just using using the
yeah.
word community here. I have my thoughts on the phrase horror community anyway, but
And I will say that part of what I like about Blue Sky is it sort of has also served as a reminder for me, as nice as it is, and as much as it seems to be occupying that early Twitter niche. I think it also broke the spell of social media, right? Like if I had to, if Blue Sky goes sideways and I have to kill it, and tomorrow, I don't have any accounts on social media and I'm down to 0 followers. Um, it is what is the sorry, I'm gonna quote Station 11. There's a line in Station 11 which goes something along the lines of like, "I found you 50 times before, and I will find you again." It's a line from the comic book in the show. It sort of makes me realize that if you build, if you have stuff, if you have a voice, if you have a publication, if you have something that people want to hear, they will find a way to figure out where you are. The people, the community elements that matter will coalesce, whether again it is a social media site, an RSS feed, or just subscribers to your main site. They'll travel with you if they're worth their money. So I think that part of what I love about Blue Sky is not only the platform seems pretty good so far, but also the notion that it broke the chokehold that Twitter had on us thinking we needed one platform that was all things and that we devote our lives to. We can do, it's not going to be easy, but we can do this independent of things like that if we need to.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to like my college days too. Like just having 10 websites bookmarked that I would check every morning.
So good. It was
And
so
like
good. That's what
exactly.
Gita talks about in the
Yeah.
Aftermath article. She was like, I fucking missed that. Oh, yeah, you just like every morning. There are exactly two web comics that I still read after all these years. One of them I've been reading for 15 years. It fucking sucks. I hate it. I'm actually not a fan of it, but I've been reading it for 15 years. So every morning I get up and I read the new comic or whatever. But there is a comfort to that ritual. There's like that small daily thing that I'm like, ooh, I need to go check out and see what the new comic at X, Y, and Z is. Um, yeah, I bookmarking sites and kind of reading through them, and of course with the convenience of newsletters and roundups that most of these publications have, I am rediscovering the joy in that experience as opposed to just like waiting for stuff to hit my feed and engaging with it. I'm a little more proactive in knowing that there's a handful of publications that I like and I want to go see what they're doing rather than waiting for it to come to me. And that feels like a better way of engaging with the internet.
Yeah. So I'm just thankful there's something else at the other side of this because, things were bleak for a little bit there. Things were kind of, I don't know. And I'm not saying they're getting better. I'm not saying we're in a perfect world by any means, but Blue Sky feels a little bit like a glimmer of hope in a I don't want to say hopeless time, but a glimmer of hope in a time where I thought, I don't know, again, like Twitter turned into this nasty owned site that definitely has an agenda. And it was like, shit, are we just stuck here now? No,
Yeah.
we're not stuck anywhere anymore. And the idea of a group of people banding together and making Blue Sky work because it's like an act of protest of anything. I like that.
You were a business major. Come on, man. Sunk cost fallacy, right?
Oh man, I don't
Yeah.
want to get into the business side of things.
I'm just saying that's the philosophy.
Yeah,
Like we were
100%.
we were unwilling to untether ourselves
Yep,
because we had committed so much that we would throw good money after bad.
exactly.
Well, is there anything else that's top of mind for you and what you're feeling thankful for this holiday season, Donato?
No, I'm just thankful we're back on track. Thankful we got a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're moving forward. And a lot of things to come. I'm sighing because there's a lot of work to be done still. We're
Yeah.
almost there, but we've got a lot of things to come on the horizon. That is just 2025 is going to be this year of we're all going to face some challenges. We're all going to take it head on, and maybe that's a bigger statement than just us as certified forgotten. Maybe that's life. Maybe that's whatever you need it to be. But I kind of feel like I'm finally in a place where I can actually take on that challenge. And I think, again, maybe that's certified forgotten and us keeping forward and keeping our heads straight and having this new platform and all these things. And maybe that's just something that I need to hear because the next 4 years are going to be whatever they are.
Yeah. Hey, and you know what? You know what else, Donato? I'm thankful for you, man. You and I have been on this journey for a handful of years now, and it's never not been fun. Like it's been up and down. We've had stretches where we definitely have hit our heads against the wall a little bit with things we were doing. We've had periods where we feel like we had a good growth that we could build around. We've had some moments where we disagreed on strategy, and we spent a lot of time talking through that. But I've never regretted getting into business with you, and I truly don't think I could say that about a lot of people that I know in the industry. So I'm thankful that I have chosen somebody that I can trust to go on this journey with, and that you're aligned. We're both very aligned with the notion about why we're doing this, and what we want to provide with to writers as a platform. And honestly, that you and I just like reading the same kind of shit, which is kind of the underscore of all of this is just you and I don't like reading, the latest SEO piece. We just want to hear people go long on weird shit, and that is the underpinning of all of Certified Forgotten, and that still holds true in 2024.
Yeah, I'll write the latest SEO pitch so I can get the money for it and then put it into Certified Forgotten. But
Correct.
I ditto that 100%. I'd say it all the time. I think I couldn't have found a better co-host alone for a podcast. Our dynamic, I love it every day. And what you bring, what I bring is so different, and that's a partnership. Like, we're supposed to have different ideas, and we're supposed to kind of go back and forth on some things because I'm seeing something, you're seeing the other, and then we finally meet in the middle. That's what we get. So I am very thankful. And again, I can't say that with a lot of other people the same way you said, working together. And, you know, we're still doing this.
We're
And I'm not,
still doing it.
and I'm happy to be doing it too. I want to make sure that's clear.
Well, to all of you out there, you've got a long holiday weekend ahead of you. Hopefully, you're going to be spending it with people you love and care about. If you're not, hopefully that you at least have time to sneak away and watch some good horror movies. So,
Or hey,
last little
listen to an episode of Certified Forgotten.
last little
We'll be
plug
there for
here.
you.
Yeah,
We'll be
last
there
little
for
plug
you.
here is we've got a really good. We're closing in on I think 80 episodes, 100 episodes. I can't remember how many episodes. We've more than
We're
that.
over 80. I think we're about mid 80s right now.
Mid 80s on
And
our
that's
total
just
runtime.
guest episodes. So I think
Yeah.
we are at about 112. I don't think we are. We're at 112. I looked it up
112. Smart man.
today.
We've got a lot of stuff that if you need recommendations, if you want to lose yourself in film, a little bit of horror therapy it's never a bad idea to step outside of your own world sometimes. Just makes you have an opportunity to take a breath and jump back into all the problems of the world on your own time. So read some essays from some of our talented writers, check out an episode, pick a writer, a film critic you like, and see if we've had them on the show. I guarantee you we probably have. And let us keep you a little bit of company over the holiday weekend if you need to escape, or if you're in the car for a couple hours. A long drive, you'll get more of this. This is what you like. The Matt Show. We promise we'll entertain, and maybe we'll accidentally educate a little bit too.